The history of Dunkirk is filled with military action. In 1838, the Battle of Bossenden Wood took place to the north of the village. 11 men died when a band of farm labourers were intercepted by a detachment of soldiers. And of course, in 1940 during the Second World War, the RAF Chainholm radar station was bombed several times by the Luftwaffe. It's no surprise then that this is the reason why Christopher Nolan wanted to make his film about this small village in the southeast of England.
You do know it's not that Dunkirk, don't you? It's the one in France, not the one in England.
Bugger. This year I have mentioned Dunkirk in 2 separate reviews, one in Saving Private Ryan and one in Darkest Hour. I remember Dunkirk being nominated and even the reason for it, to settle a family dispute on whether this is a good film or not. Well, that's what I'm here to determine today, and for the record, this is my first time watching this film and I have heard some good things about it. Let's see which side of the debate I fall onto. Here's my review of Dunkirk. In 1940, the enemy army have pushed the French and English armies back to the beaches of Dunkirk. There, thousands of soldiers are trying to get evacuated back to England, where one soldier, Tommy, meets Gibson, a mute soldier burying his colleague, and the two try everything they can to get on the next boat home. However, every ship is being bombed from above. On one of the attempts they rescue Alex, and the 3 of them get on a hospital ship, with Gibson on the deck and the other soldiers below deck. That ship too gets bombed, with Gibson opening the hatch door on the outside, saving many inside, including Tommy and Alex. The 3 of them head back to the beach and soon join up with another platoon who decide to commandeer an abandoned fishing boat. They all hide below deck and wait for the tide to come in. Unfortunately for them, the enemy starts shooting at the boat, believing it to be abandoned, and the owner of the boat, a Dutch fisherman, also joins the soldiers. As the tide comes in, the boat starts to sink, with Alex suggesting that Gibson needs to leave as he may be an enemy soldier and he hasn't spoken. Gibson then reveals that he's actually French but wanted to escape to England. The soldiers and fishermen escape, but Gibson drowns. Over the last few days, Operation Dynamo has been in effect, and the Navy have been requisitioning fisher boats in England to rescue as many soldiers as possible. The crew of Mr. Dawson, alongside his son Peter and 15-year-old hand George, decide to go across the channel themselves to rescue the soldiers, not wanting their boat, the Moonstone, to be taken by the Navy. On the way to Dunkirk, they find a sole survivor of a wreck who is clearly shell-shocked. They rescue him, but he doesn't want to go anywhere near Dunkirk, understandably. He's taken below deck and locked into one of the bedrooms. However, after he breaks out of the room, a scuffle ensues and George gets shoved, hitting his head and bleeding slowly. The soldier causes no further trouble and keeps asking after George, with Peter not letting on that George is not doing well. In the air, 3 RAF pilots are dogfighting with the enemy. After their leader is shot down, Farrier and Collins carry on. However, Farrier has had his fuel gauge damaged and so relies on Collins to keep an eye on how much fuel is left. Collins is then shot down and lands on the water, narrowly rescued from drowning, trapped in the cockpit by the crew of the Moonstone. Farrier carries on instead of heading back to the base and stops a bombing on a destroyer, running out of fuel as he does. He glides the plane over the beach of Dunkirk as Tommy and Alex are rescued by the Moonstone, narrowly avoiding an oil fire on the water. As they get on the boat, one of the soldiers tells Peter that George has died. Peter, though, doesn't tell the shell-shocked soldier because he's been through enough as it is. The Moonstone heads back to England full of soldiers who are taken by train back to Woking. In Weymouth, Peter reports George's death to the local paper, and in France, Farrier sets his plane ablaze and gets captured by the enemy. Before I go into the review proper, I'm going to sit on the fence of the whole "is the film actually good" debate. It's a well-made film with a high production value that unfortunately I didn't really get into. The main reason for this is the structure of the movie, which is kind of all over the place. I understand what the idea is, but I don't think it's executed well. The film is separated into 3 sections. The Mole, which is a large stone-based pier and not, as I thought, one of the vehicles from Thunderbirds. There's also the sea and the air. Each of these sections has a period of time assigned to it, saying how long each part of that story takes. So the mole takes place over 1 week, the sea takes place over 1 day, and the sky takes place over 1 hour. This is all well and good, but the film goes between these three way too often, meaning it's difficult to get any sense of momentum in telling the three stories. The time lapses between the three as well make for a disjointed film until the three stories meet right at the end, and I do really like the ending. When you dig into it, the plot is pretty thin, and it seems like the frequent switches between the plot points covers for that. I don't think it needed to be honest. The plot is not the main reason to enjoy this film because the experience is the main takeaway. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it was widely reported at the time that one of the veterans, Ken Sturdy, who was 97 when he saw the premiere, was in tears at how realistic it was. It reminded him of being on Dunkirk beach as a 20-year-old. I can honestly believe that because the visuals, the atmosphere, and most importantly the sound design is really immersive. If I'd seen this at the cinema or in IMAX, I would have enjoyed this a lot more, I suspect. The boom of the waves hitting the mole, the explosions in the water, the bullets flying in the town, all of which add to the atmosphere of the movie and really brings you into this world. A weird thing I noticed though, Germans or Germany are not mentioned at all. Instead they're referred to as the enemy. I'm not the biggest fan of this. Either you go for historically accurate or don't. And I doubt the soldiers wouldn't have called the enemy Germans or another less YouTube friendly name. You know, the one beginning with N? Nasty people. I've now seen 6 Christopher Nolan films, Dunkirk, Tenet and Inception, alongside the Dark Knight trilogy. I'm beginning to notice a trend to mess with timelines in the non-Batman movies, and frankly, I haven't enjoyed them that much. They're overly complicated and it just makes for a more confusing time. Nolan, from what I've seen, also tends to use a lot of the same actors and even Hans Zimmer for the soundtrack. There's nothing wrong with knowing who you like working with, and to his credit, those 3 films are not that similar to each other. Acting wise, there is not a weak performance amongst the fairly stacked cast. Cillian Murphy, Mark Rylance, Tom Hardy and Kenneth Branagh all do well, and I didn't notice this at the time, but Michael Caine has a small cameo. But it's the lesser known actors that really make the piece. Fionn Whitehead as Tommy, Tom Glyn Carney as Peter, and even Aneurin Barnard as Gibson were woven with the more well-known actors as well. Then there's Harry Styles. There was a lot of fuss made over the fact that he played Alex, and he does alright. You wouldn't know that acting is his primary vocation, but it's also not an Oscar-winning performance. The acting may not have won any Oscars, but Dunkirk did quite well at the Academy Awards, winning 3 Oscars for Best Sound Editing and Sound Mixing, as well as Best Film Editing. It was also nominated for Best Cinematography, losing out to Blade Runner 2049, as well as nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Product Design, and Best Original Score, losing out on all 4 of those to The Shape of Water. The Academy that year were essentially saying, "I'm in love with the shape of water." The sense of realism in the film can be attributed to the practical effects and the fact that the movie was filmed in the actual location. There's barely any CGI used and around 1,000 extras, as well as real planes and ships. It makes scenes such as the planes bombing soldiers on the beach or on the mole even more impressive, and building into that immersion. The attention to detail has been praised for how realistic things were to the real events, although small things like incorrect coloured plain nose cones and leaflets being in colour instead of black and white have been picked up on. There has been some creative license due to the fact that the characters are all fictional, but all in all the accuracy to real events has been well praised. The film too was well received for the most part, and I do see it. As I said earlier, this is a well made film, but I think that story aspect has put me off. It comes down to what you want from a movie. Do you want a strong story or a visual and audio experience? Dunkirk is the latter and comes with my recommendation if you're looking for an immersive Second World War movie specifically about the evacuation of Dunkirk. I may not be a fan of the structure or the skipping between time periods, but I do like Dunkirk as a whole. Again, it's another film not to be overly analysed. Perhaps it's worth doing a double bill with this and Darkest Hour to get a full political and on the ground experience of that period of time. It's worth a watch if you're into that kind of film. Dunkirk has done well. Thank you for making it this far. If you like what you see, please feel free to give this video a like and share it around. Maybe leave a comment below about what you thought of this video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can get notified when I upload new videos. If you'd like to support me in other ways, you can buy merchandise at bradleyj.tmail.com, where you can buy t-shirts and tote bags. Or you can become a patron at www.patreon.com/BradleyJVoices for just £1 a month. Coming up next for the Film Review Open Challenge is Cockneys vs Zombies. For now though, thank you very much for watching.